Time for a shark attack.
What's up everyone? With the release of Mako in patch 4.07, I'm here to bring you a new updated tier list to help you rank up in Season 18. Patch 4.07 brought with it major Qatar buffs, major cannon nerfs, and a slew of minor changes to the majority of other weapons, all while Greatsword continues to dominate at the top. Since his release, Jan has been one of the strongest characters, and after only receiving minor frame nerfs to his side sig and end sig, he is still at the top of the meta. Once you master dash cancelling out of Greatsword moves, it becomes very difficult to punish whiffs. That on top of Greatsword's recovery being one of the strongest, safest moves in the entire game, it is very daunting to play against Greatsword. On top of that, Jan has some of the best sigs in the entire game. His end sig on Greatsword is a force field, his side sig on Sword is out of this world, and his end sig on Sword is also nothing to be scoffed at. Not to mention his other three sigs are also all useful, unlike some other characters lower on the tier list. Like most recent characters on release, Mako is simply just overtuned, and although she is not legal for the Mammoth Cup, I do think that she deserves to be in the Z tier. Her down sig on Katars is unparalleled in strength, and her other sigs are not too shabby as well as having fairly good stats, so for that reason she is in the Z tier. If we take a look back at the tier list, you'll notice that a lot of the characters in S tier have either hammer or gauntlets, which I believe are the two next best weapons after Greatsword. At a glance, Quora may not seem special, but his end sig on hammer, not only is it incredibly useful in neutral and also as a killing tool, but it true combos out of downlight, which is one of the few sig true combos left in the game. Not to mention his other sigs are very potent as well, with hammer down sig dealing 35 damage and hammer side sig killing extremely early. That, on top of having two of the three best weapons, and having excellent, well-rounded stats, solidifies Quora's spot in the S tier. Koji is another legend with a sig true combo with D-Light into end sig on Sword, and he's one of those legends where the sigs on the weapons really cover the weapon's weaknesses. For example, his bow down sig is extremely potent at killing, which is bow's main weakness. Sword side sig also is very efficient at killing in a range where Sword can sometimes struggle to find efficient knockouts. Not to mention that the combination of bow and sword on a character is bound to be good, considering that Sword overall is very efficient at killing where bow is not. Similarly to Koji, Rayman is a pretty basic character with just a little bit of extra oomph that puts him over the edge. His gauntlet sigs, specifically down sig and side sig, are massively underrated and are very effective when used on platform maps, and I think we all know how strong Rayman Axe down sig is. Gauntlets have a 3-hit true combo executable grounded and from gravity cancel, which is extraordinarily powerful, and is also the reason why most of those gauntlet characters are in S tier. And to cap it all off, Rayman actually got buffed in the last patch, where they made his axe side sig faster for whatever reason. So there's just another reason why Rayman is good. Just to briefly touch on Brynn, I think one of the main reasons that she's so good is her stats are excellent for her weapon. Mainly though, the reason why I think she's so good is that her spear down sig is really outdated, and it does 40 damage. And it's not exactly a difficult move to hit or an easy move to punish, so for that reason, she's S tier. Wu Shang is another character in S tier with spear, and it's pretty much for the exact same reason as Brynn. His spear side sig is absolutely bonkers, probably a top 5 sig in the entire game. It kills early, it's super safe, and also he has pretty good stats, so there's nothing really more to it. He also has gauntlets, which is obviously a plus. And there's nothing really deeper than that. He's just super solid with a really overtuned sig, and that's all it takes to be a really good character in Brawlhalla. And lastly, in the S tier, I do want to focus on Fate, who despite receiving a 5-frame nerf on her down sig on Orb, I think is still extraordinarily strong. Her Orb end sig, which I think is her second best sig, didn't get touched at all. On top of her having nigh perfect stats for her weapon combination, and her other sigs not being too shabby themselves, I think Fate is definitely deserving of S tier. If we take a look at the A tier, we'll notice a lot of characters that have suboptimal but still good stats. Maybe not extremely powerful signatures, but still good ones, and weapon combinations that can pass but aren't the best. As a legend, Caspian has always felt pretty bad to play just because his weapons kind of do the same thing. But over these last few patches, Caspian has sneakily crept up with repeat buffs to his down sigs, and on top of gauntlets already being super good this patch, as I've covered multiple times in this video already, Qatar's got a pretty massive buff in this patch where they gave Sidelight a big dash impulse back, where if you remember back to mid 2019, that is the reason why Qatars were so good back then. So on top of the buffs, he's in a spot where he's on the cusp of being S tier. Kanan got hit pretty hard in this patch, with Sidelight not only getting a reduced hitbox, but also making it harder to string into certain moves. Not only that, Side Air's angle is more vertical, which makes it harder to knock out with, and they also decreased the stun of Canondair by 3. However, Zol did get compensation buffs with his side sigs getting much faster, which actually makes side sig on Axe fairly usable. This, on top of his stats being pretty good and speed being less relevant on canon characters due to Ser moving you so much, Zol is still in a pretty good spot. I feel like a lot of people are going to look at these canon changes and think it's very major, but overall canon's game plan is still the same. Give it a few weeks and I think canon will be in a similar spot that it was before the patch, although slightly worse. Volkov's in a tough spot. He really lacks in stats. He has 8 dex and 4 speed, which is absolutely atrocious. And his sigs are just not what they once were. On release he was ridiculously overtuned, but they've obviously brought him back a little bit. And his sigs are honestly still pretty good, and that's what brings him up to the A tier. But his stats are just so bad, and his weapon combo can really struggle killing, so that's why he's not further up on the tier list. Ulgrim was definitely the most nerfed character this patch. His end sig on Lance and Axe both no longer hit grounded, which is a massive nerf and a much needed nerf after months, what felt like, of Ulgrim dominance. Not only that, but Axe got minor nerfs and Lance got minor nerfs. So Ulgrim was hit very hard. However, he's still pretty solid. As far as Lance goes, it was a nerf, but it was not that big of a nerf. And Axe was pretty much the same, just minor frame changes. So as far as why Ulgrim is strong, his sigs, even though they don't hit grounded anymore, his end sigs are still both pretty good. His down sig on Axe is extremely good. His side sig on Axe is pretty good. And his stats are the best stats in the entire game. So it's hard to rate him any lower than A tier. And I think the nerfs to the weapons were not enough to bring him down any further than from S tier to A. Yumiko is one of those legends that has so much potential that is so wasted by her stat line. I think that the dex really cripples her a lot of the time because dex is fairly irrelevant when you're playing hammer and bow. And it feels like even when you do hit those downsig openers, the majority of the time you can't even get a super effective follow-up, which just makes it really unfun to play, and it just makes it feel less effective than other hammer characters. Overall, her weapon combo is awesome. They match each other perfectly, but as long as her downsigs aren't leading to more than they already are, her stat line just doesn't justify picking her over any other hammer legend. The characters in B and C tier are simply just overshadowed by the rest. It's not even that they're necessarily bad, it's just relative to other legends with the same weapons, they're just harder, or they're just worse, or they have worse stats, or they have a worse weapon combination. And there's nothing wrong with playing a character in B or C tier, it's just that you're gonna have to work much harder to win with them as opposed to someone higher up on the tier list. However, there's one legend which I want to hone in on, and that is Thatch. Thatch received a really nice buff this patch, making it so that delay into GC side sig on sword is unjumpable, which means that if they don't have a dodge, then it's effectively true. On top of this, he has delay into chase dodge end sig on guns, being a true 40 damage combo. Another one of those sig true combos that I've been harping about this whole video. But his stats are really what brings it back for me. He has high speed and high attack, but that 3 defense is just so hard to overlook, especially with weapons that are super punishing when you miss, like guns. I would look out for Thatch to potentially rise up on the tier list in the future. And with players like I'm Llama already showing top 9s with Thatch, it wouldn't surprise me if we eventually saw a Thatch in top 8 and he would be bumped up in the tier list. that's going to be it for this edition of the 1v1 tier list. I greatly appreciate you for making it this far in the video. The next edition of the 1v1 tier list will be before the last chance qualifiers for BCS, which is in just a few weeks. Stay tuned for more daily ranked content, and until the next one, peace out.